Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. Today I'm going to share some tips with you on a subject area that really scares a lot of homeschooling parents, and that is assigning high school credits in a relaxed homeschool. You know, even if you are confident as a homeschooling parent, if you've been doing it for a while, once you get to the point of having to calculate credits for your high schooler, that could be the point in time where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm totally not prepared for this, or I am not qualified for this. You know, that one thing that a lot of parents in the beginning are afraid of, that they're not qualified for. It can often be something that creeps up again once you have to do all of the bureaucratic red tape things that have to be done at the end of the high school years. So the very first thing that I want to point out is that you want to find out what your specific state laws say regarding credits and what subject areas need to be covered in order for your homeschooler to graduate. Because even though the credit hours or the credit numbers and the subject areas are similar from state to state, they're not always exactly the same. So that is something that you are going to have to look into yourself, because I am definitely not an expert in all 50 states on their homeschool laws or what they require. As far as I know, I have not heard of a state that specifically tells you how you have to calculate the credits. I could be wrong on that, but so far I have never had someone tell me that their state told them exactly how they have to calculate the credits. So what I want to share with you today are just some ideas, some tips on calculating those credit hours, especially in a relaxed homeschool. Because if you are a school at home family, it can be a little bit easier to calculate credits than it is if you have a child who is doing relaxed homeschooling and who learns in a lot of different ways and not just in a textbook. Now, I will say that there are a lot of relaxed homeschooling families whose high schoolers are using textbooks. So if that is the case, then by all means, you could do it the exact way that a lot of school at home families do it. And you could calculate credits by if your child has completed a textbook in a certain subject area or a certain percentage of that textbook in a certain subject area. I know that the magic number for a lot of like accredited homeschool diploma agencies is always 2/3 of a textbook. So even if you're not using an accredited diploma agency, that might be a good rule of thumb, is to just think of 2/3 of a textbook as counting a full credit in that subject area. Now, if your child is not using textbooks every single day in their learning, that is completely okay. Your child does not need to be using textbooks every day in order to get their credits for graduation. Another way that you can calculate their credits for graduation is if you count the number of days that your teenager is using towards a specific subject. For example, math. If they are doing that math 5 days a week, then you could just count that out. Again, as with the 2/3 of a textbook, the magic number for accredited homeschool diploma agencies that I have read about or used in the past is 120 days. So if your child has done 120 days in which they have at least done some work in that subject area, that will count as a credit. Now, I will point out that a lot of states will look at 180 days or around that amount. I think that I've seen some that are 170, but it's usually around 180 days for a homeschool year. So if they've got about 120 of those days in, that would count as a credit. If your child, say for example, has 60 days in rather than the 120, then that would count as a half credit. Now, if you have a teenager who doesn't do their subject 5 days a week or 4 days a week, but if they do it maybe just once or twice a week, but when they do it, they are spending a lot of time on it, then you could use the option of counting the hours that they spend towards a certain subject area. And as with the days, the number is usually 120 hours. So it's usually 120 days, or 120 hours. So if your child, say, only does math twice a week, but they are spending 3 hours a day each day that they do it, that then would count as 6 hours for 1 week's worth of math, rather than if you would just say they did 2 days worth of math. So it really depends on how your teenager learns, or just what you prefer as the homeschooling parent. Another idea for calculating credits, especially if you have a homeschooler who is more of an unschooler or who does a lot of self-directed learning, things that are much harder for you to track, you could also have them write a research paper that shows that they have a mastery of the subject area, or that they have made, a progression of knowledge throughout the year. Now, a lot of students will do some sort of writing throughout the year. And so I wouldn't look at this as just being one of those ordinary papers that they might have been writing. If it is something that you are going to be counting as, what their credit is going to be calculated out of, I've seen, again, with the accredited agencies, that they will typically say about 10 pages long, or about 2,500 words. These are all suggestions. I don't want you to think that this is absolutely how you have to do it, but this is just what I have read about how others have done it. And, I think that it's a good rule of thumb that if you're using one research paper really to determine whether or not they get the credit in that subject area, you definitely do want it to be something more involved than what they might have been doing throughout the year. Now, another idea, and this is, again, something else that will go more towards those students who are unschooling, self-directed learning, or who are out and about learning in all different ways, is if you just watch them carefully, have a lot of interactions with them, and you see a noticeable progression of knowledge or skills in the subject areas. So these evaluations could be, through tests or quizzes or exams that you give to your homeschooler. It could be through watching the hands-on activities that they are doing throughout the year. It could be written work that they've done, and if you see that there is a natural progression in what they've been learning, that they are gaining more than what they started with at the beginning of the year. Or sometimes it can just be through conversations and interactions that you've had with your child in the subject areas. If you have a lot of in-depth conversations with your kids, it's pretty easy to know what it is that they do and what they don't know, and what they have learned and what they have not learned. So that conversations are a great evaluation for any homeschool. Another idea for calculating credits, this actually is very similar to the textbook method, is if you are a Charlotte Mason family, one idea is if you have a certain number of living books that you want your child to read throughout that year, or it doesn't have to be a specific number. Maybe you have a specific lineup of books that you want them to read. So for example, if they are learning about a certain time period in history, you might decide, okay, I want them to start here and find a living book for that, and then work their way up through that time period until they get to the end of the time period. And if they read through all of those books, and if you choose to, you could have them supplement that with conversations with you, with written or oral narrations. You could have them write papers on, if not all of the books that they read, on some of the books that they've read. You could have them notebook about these books, but again, using living books instead of the textbooks, you could also use that as calculating a credit for your child got this certain amount of work completed that you had expected them to do. And the last idea that I have for you today is if your child has a mastery of a subject area through an apprenticeship or maybe volunteer work that they have been doing throughout the year. So for example, if your child is doing zoology as an elective, and if they have been volunteering at the zoo or at a veterinary clinic, and if they have spent a lot of time there, and if they have picked up all sorts of skills, that is a fantastic way for your child to get a credit towards that specific subject area. Because, those real life hands-on experiences are often so much better than any book learning that they possibly could have done, because they see how these things are happening, right there as it's happening. They see how certain situations are being handled. They actually know how these things work. They're not just reading hypothetical situations. They are living these situations. And so they are getting the opportunity to not only see how other people in that line of work will handle certain situations, but sometimes they are the ones who are learning how to handle them themselves. So yes, apprenticeships and volunteer work is another great way if they are really involved in something and if they are spending a lot of time doing it. Yes, by all means, you can count that towards a credit for a subject area. Now, if you have any other suggestions on ways to calculate credits that I might have missed, I would love if you would hop over to my Instagram page. I will at some point have a thumbnail for this video, and you can leave a comment there because YouTube disabled my comments, so you can't leave a comment here. But you can also go over on my YouTube channel. If you click on community, on my community page, I will also post a thumbnail there. And if you have another idea, you can leave a comment there as well. Or if you have any questions or comments, you can also leave a comment on either my community page or Instagram. But anyway, that's all that I have. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.